Dear friends and colleagues, nice to meet you. My name is Vadim Sirota, an expert from Ukraine, and I'd like to present you my YouTube channel. This YouTube channel will be focused on the events in banking and finance and wider economic issues. And this primary focus will be on Ukraine, but all these events will be disclosed, revealed, presented to you from the perspective of the world-leading expert community agenda. So I'll do my best to make it interesting for you. Please subscribe, like, and share. So nowadays I'll try to discuss such issue: Russia's sovereign default, Russia's looming sovereign default. Is this economic reality or fairy tale for mainstream media? At the beginning of the April, the Ukrainian Facebook expert segment felt into euphoria. It was too positive, in my opinion. Everybody expected that Russia would face its sovereign default in the nearest future within next months. So you have only paragraphs in books on economic history about Russia's Bolshevik default. It's meaning the default on obligations of Tsar Russia government in 1918. But it belongs more to historic memory. And as for the recent experience, you may mention the Russian default, which took place in 1998. It caused economic disaster not only in Russia, but in neighboring countries, including Ukraine. And it resulted in catastrophic decrease of living standards of Russian people, in financial crunch, in ruble devaluation, etc. So the consequences were quite negative. But this time, in my opinion, situation is quite different. And I suggest that there is no economic rationale for this default, but political logic dominates in such case. So I'll try to make my arguments from three positions. So position number one. First of all, Russia's government has a sound financial standing nowadays. It has enough fossil fuels export revenues to pay back its own debts. Let's explain in details. According to the magazine National Interest, US magazine, European countries found themselves paying for Russian fossil fuels approximately 700 billion per day. One figure. The next figure was revealed in the report published by the Center for Research on Energy and Clean. It was published in details in the Guardian newspaper. And according to this report, from the beginning of Ukrainian and Russia war conflict, the export revenue of Russian Federation from export fossil fuels has risen twice. It costs approximately 62 billion euro, and 44 billion euro is paid by Europe. It's a colossal amount. And also I want to stress one fact, that Germany alone pays 4.5 billion euros per month. And we may turn back to the first episode, which triggered such discussion about Russia default. I mean, in the middle of the March, coupon payment on sovereign debt. The size of such coupon payment was 170 million United States dollars, or approximately 89 million euro. You may compare these figures, and the conclusion is obvious, is quite obvious, that export proceeds Russian from oil and gas trade is per day, daily export proceeds is quite enough to cover this payment without any catastrophic consequences. Yes, it's really. So there are no reasonable arguments for financial vulnerabilities of Russian public finance. Yes, but we may continue more. In my opinion, the second position I try to present you is that the West didn't nudge Russia to default. It didn't take a tough stance towards Russia. And the sovereign debt payment to be conducted on April 4 this year is a striking sample of such situation. First of all, I tried to pay your attention to the clawback of the United States Treasury in the sanction package. It's according to the United States Treasury officials, it was proclaimed that for a period of time from the beginning of March till 25 May, United States residents are allowed to take any payments from Russian Central Bank, the Ministry of Finance, Fund of Sovereign Wealth, etc. It's a clause allowing Russian sovereign creditors to be paid back at the cost of frozen currency exchange. Currency and gold exchanges frozen in the United States, European countries, etc. So even against the background of such tough sanctions, the West and the Russian Financial Authority find a way for win-win cooperation. The Russian Financial Authority doesn't need to use the fossil fuels export proceeds to pay for sovereign debt. It may use its sanctioned current foreign exchange reserves. It may in the future, not in the future, in the past. And then it was very strange events. I'll describe it later. But you should take notice that till the end of this year, the Russian payments on sovereign debt are stress the state debt, not the debt of state-owned corporations like Gazprom, Russian Railways, etc., but sovereign debt is above 4 billion euro, 4 billion United States dollars, excuse me. And on April 4 this year was the payment date for approximately 15% of this amount due to payback. The total amount of such installment on tranche was 2 billion United States dollars. It's colossal amount, and if Russian Federation pay if Russian Federation would pay back it, so we were not only in discussion about the sovereign debt reserve default, for example. So it's a crisis period to make this one payment to cover 50% of total expenses and payments on sovereign debt, and everything will be all right until the end of the year. Yes, and everything was real. And everything had all the chances to be all right. The size of foreign exchange reserves was quite big to cover this payment, but at the end of the March, the decree of Russian President Vladimir Putin arose. It was about the payments into unfriendly countries in rubles, in Russian rubles. And for example, gas payment from the European countries should be treated in Russian national currency, yes. And the same is for tranches to be paid back on sovereign debt. Russian Federation may, according to the position of Russian authority, use its own national currency to pay its foreign debts denominated in currencies of other states. And the week before this payment date for April, Russian Minister of Finance bought back approximately 72.5% of the total outstanding amount of this tranche. And the rest of investors maybe found themselves eligible be fooled, for example, because they expected to get hard currency. Instead, they were proposed to take some amount of Russian ruble. And that's why such investors didn't agree on such terms. In the mainstream business media, we might read about starting of grace period within a month till the beginning of May. The grace period. After this end of such grace period, the procedure of default will start. Yes. So everything was interesting, but we may conclude that some negotiations took place. And yesterday, in the leading media, I found information that the rest of this debt is equal to approximately more than 600 million United States dollars were paid back in hard currency, not in Russian national currency. So it may be considered that the foreign exchange reserves were the part of such. I don't consider about the sources of this payment, but we should take notice that after the Bucha massacre, the United States Treasury prohibited the payments the proceedings annihilated this clawback, this clause, and Russia wasn't able to use its frozen foreign exchange reserves to make their payments on sovereign debt. So this May deadline was annihilated at the beginning of April. It's suddenly news that Russia found some currency to repay its debt, But we may conclude that not such reserves, but export fossil fuels export proceeds were the core source to avoid such highly expected in Ukraine society default, sovereign default. So we may conclude that it must be discussed. The third position I want to reveal to you. Third position is this, that such Russia's financial weapon, where specific ruble internationalization policy goes far beyond the proper payment on sovereign debt obligations. I mean that gas payments, oil payments within European countries, which fell into the category of unfriendly in Russian authorities' opinion, are forced to pay for such commodity in Russian national currency. And it's a crucial concern in Brussels. According to the legal assessment provided by the ambassadors of European Union countries in Brussels, contains the conclusion that using such scheme of repayment for fossil fuels will result in breaking the sanction regime imposed on Russia after Ukraine's invasion into Ukraine. I'll describe you in details. To be back for gas, for example, used a mediatory financial institution, Gazprom Bank, the core bank, to conduct such kind of financial transactions. The entity, European gas trader, is forced to open two accounts, one in its own currency, in currency of payment, and the second one in Russian rubles. And first of all amount, the first account in foreign currency is credited, and then the Russian bank managers make foreign exchange transaction, conversion operation, and the required amount of Russian national currency is credited to the second account. And in opinion of the lawyers, European lawyers and experts of Oxford Institute for Energy Studies, this resulted in this allows to contravene sanctions regime, because the Central Bank of Russian Federation is granted with opportunity to establish the timing of such operation as well as the crucial moment, the fixed, in its opinion, currency exchange rate. It's broken, in this way is broken the logic of sanctions weapon established on Russia. So it's a great issue, given the inability of European countries to reject the needed commodity from Russia, and to find it takes time to find an alternative to Russian supply. And to describe the size of such problem, approximately 97% of contracts, gas contracts, fossil fuels contracts, not gas contracts, are denominated in United States dollars and euro. Its quantity is approximately, to tell the truth, 150 contracts will be affected in such scene, if such payment scheme will be implemented. So Russia has enough financial weapon to create its own game, to lever. It has sound lever to influence the Western circles, the Western authorities, thinking our opportunity to use Russian sovereign default. So the Russian arguments is sound enough, I would want to tell you. So I'll try to explain you the complexity of such issue. And to sum up, I'd like to quote Mark Twain. According to this situation, the reports about the Russia's sovereign default are greatly exaggerated. Yes. And in the beginning of the May, the bargaining power of Russia in the financial area will pass through its own stress test. We will have the opportunity to observe whether the sanctions regime effective enough and what toolkit is available in this country, Russian Federation, I mean, to contravene the tough stance against its financial position. So thank you for your attention. Please don't hesitate to ask me on such things. Subscribe to my video and good evening for everybody. Bye-bye.